The crematorium worker grabbed my arm just as I was about to leave. His grip was tight. Urgent. Sir, wait. I frowned and tried to pull away. My family was already walking toward the parking lot. The service was over. I didn't want another conversation. Not today. But the man leaned closer. His voice dropped to a whisper. You should know something. What? He glanced toward the heavy steel doors of the furnace room. Then he said quietly, the furnace was empty. For a moment I just stared at him. What are you talking about? My grandmother had been inside that coffin. I had seen her myself. 2 days earlier. Lying in the funeral home. Peaceful. Still. Dead. At least, that's what we all believed. But the man slowly shook his head. No, sir. His eyes were completely serious. There was no body in that coffin. My stomach tightened. Behind us, the deep mechanical roar of the cremation furnace echoed through the hallway. And suddenly something about the entire day felt wrong. But before I continue, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. Your support really helps this channel grow. At that moment I still thought the funeral was over. I was wrong. My name is Daniel Hayes. And the day my grandmother was supposed to be cremated, was the day I discovered the coffin had been empty all along. My name is Daniel Hayes. 37 years old. Corporate lawyer. A man who believed facts mattered more than feelings. That morning I had buried my grandmother. Or at least, I thought I had. Her name was Eleanor Hayes. She raised me after my father died when I was 9. Strong. Sharp. Quiet in a way that made people listen when she finally spoke. The kind of woman who kept secrets. But never from me. At least that's what I believed until the crematorium worker told me the furnace had been empty. I looked past him toward the hallway that led to the furnace room. The heavy steel doors were closed now. Sealed. Final. What are you saying? I asked quietly. The man shifted his weight. His name tag read Marcus. I'm saying, he replied slowly, when we opened the coffin inside the chamber, there was no body. My throat felt dry. That's impossible. I thought so too. His eyes scanned the corridor again, making sure no one was nearby. Then he reached into the pocket of his gray work jacket. And pulled out something small. A key. Brass. Old. He pressed it into my hand. Your grandmother paid me to give you this. For a second I just stared at the object resting in my palm. A storage key. The kind used for rental lockers. What is this? I asked. She told me you'd ask that. The man lowered his voice even further. Unit 42. Rivergate Storage. My heartbeat slowed. Not from calm. From the strange cold feeling that spreads through your body when reality begins to shift. When did she give you this? Marcus hesitated. Then said something that made my stomach tighten. 8 years ago. 8 years. You're telling me my grandmother came here 8 years ago, and planned this? He nodded once. She said if the day ever came when her coffin entered that furnace. He glanced toward the steel doors again. I should find you before the cremation finished. I felt the key cutting into my palm. Why me? She said you'd understand. I almost laughed. I don't understand anything. Marcus studied my face for a long moment. Then he leaned closer. There's something else. My stomach dropped. What? When the coffin arrived this morning, the paperwork said Eleanor Hayes. My chest tightened. But the weight was wrong. Wrong? Marcus nodded slowly. I've worked here 22 years. He tapped the side of the furnace room door with his knuckle. You learn to notice things. What things? He exhaled quietly. Like when a coffin is empty. A cold silence settled between us. Behind us, the front doors of the crematorium opened. My mother's voice echoed faintly from the parking lot. Daniel? Are you coming? Marcus stepped back immediately. Go, he said. But before I could move, he grabbed my sleeve again. One last time. Your grandmother told me to say something else. My pulse jumped. What? Marcus looked directly into my eyes. And whispered. Don't go home tonight. The words landed like a stone in my chest. Why? He shook his head. She didn't explain. Outside, my mother called again. Daniel. Marcus stepped away from me. Like the conversation had never happened. Like we were strangers again. I walked out of the crematorium slowly. The afternoon sky was gray. Heavy. My family stood near the cars in the parking lot. My mother was hugging my aunt. My cousin Brian was loading flowers into the trunk. Everything looked normal. Too normal. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text message. From my mother. I frowned. She was 20 feet away from me. Why would she text me? I opened the message. 3 words. Come home alone. I looked up immediately. My mother was still standing by the car. Talking. Laughing softly through tears. Her phone wasn't even in her hand. A strange chill ran down my spine. I looked back at the screen. Another message appeared. Don't bring anyone. My grip tightened around the key Marcus had given me. Unit 42. Rivergate Storage. And suddenly one thought began to grow in the back of my mind. If my grandmother hadn't been inside that coffin, then where was she? And more importantly, who had just texted me from my mother's phone? I didn't answer the message. For a moment I just stood there in the parking lot, staring at the screen. Come home alone. The words felt wrong. Not the meaning. The tone. My mother never texted like that. Never. She always wrote Danny. Always added a heart emoji she had just learned how to use last year. But this message was cold. Direct. Almost like an order. I looked up again. She was still standing by the car with my aunt. Talking. Crying. Completely unaware that her phone had just sent me 2 messages. A second later my phone buzzed again. Another text. Now. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and walked toward them. My mother saw me and forced a tired smile. There you are, she said softly. I thought you disappeared. Just needed some air. She hugged me. Her arms were trembling slightly. Funerals do that to people. But as she stepped back, I noticed something else. Her purse was open. Her phone wasn't inside. Mom, I said carefully. Yes. Where's your phone? She frowned. What do you mean? You don't have it with you. She looked down at her purse. Then around the parking lot. I must have left it inside. Inside. My pulse spiked. Inside the crematorium. Where Marcus had just told me my grandmother's coffin was empty. Do you want me to go get it? I asked. No, it's fine. I'll grab it later. She wiped her eyes. Let's just go home. The words hit me harder than they should have. Go home. My fingers tightened around the small brass key in my pocket. Unit 42. Rivergate Storage. And the warning. Don't go home tonight. I forced a neutral expression. Actually. I need to stop somewhere first. My cousin Brian looked up from the trunk. Now. Just for a bit. My mother studied my face. You're not driving back with us. I'll meet you later. She looked tired. Too tired to question it. Okay, she said quietly. But don't stay out too long. Today has been a lot. I know. I hugged her again. This time longer. Something in my chest told me I might regret not doing that. Then I walked to my car. My hands were shaking slightly as I started the engine. I checked the rearview mirror. My family was getting into their cars. The funeral was over. Life was supposed to go back to normal. But as I drove away from the crematorium, one thought kept repeating in my head. If the coffin had been empty, then someone had arranged the entire funeral. Someone had signed the paperwork. Someone had delivered that coffin. And someone had wanted everyone to believe my grandmother was dead. My phone buzzed again. Another text from my mother's number. I slowed the car and glanced at the screen. Daniel. I know where you're going. My chest tightened. A second message appeared immediately after. Don't open that storage unit. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. Because there was only one way anyone could know about the storage unit. Marcus. The crematorium worker. The man who had just given me the key. The man who told me my grandmother had planned all of this 8 years ago. Unless someone else already knew about it. And was watching me right now. I checked the rearview mirror. At first, I saw nothing unusual. Just the same quiet suburban road leading away from the crematorium. Gray sky. Empty sidewalks. 2 cars behind me. One turned left at the next intersection. The other stayed. Black SUV. I drove another block. The SUV stayed behind me. Maybe coincidence. Maybe not. My phone buzzed again. Another message from my mother's number. Turn around, Daniel. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. Another message appeared immediately after. You won't like what happens if you don't. My heartbeat slowed. Not from calm. From the strange, focused feeling that comes when your brain decides something is very wrong. I drove 3 more blocks. Then turned suddenly into a small grocery store parking lot. The SUV passed me. Didn't slow down. Didn't stop. Just kept driving. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe grief was messing with my head. But the message still sat on my phone. You won't like what happens. I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Then I pulled the key from my pocket. Small. Brass. The number 42 stamped into the metal. My grandmother had arranged this 8 years ago. 8 years. Which meant one thing. Whatever was happening now. She had seen it coming. I started the engine again. Rivergate Storage was 20 minutes away on the edge of town. The drive felt longer. Every red light felt like someone watching. Every passing car made me check the mirror again. But no one followed me this time. When I finally turned onto Rivergate Road, the city thinned out quickly. Warehouses. Old repair shops. Empty lots. Then the storage facility appeared ahead. Rows of metal units behind a tall chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Security cameras hung from every corner. A single office building sat near the entrance. The sign read, Rivergate Storage. I parked across the street. For a moment, I just sat there. Thinking. My grandmother had been careful her entire life. She balanced every checkbook by hand. Kept records for everything. Never trusted banks fully. And yet she had rented a storage unit 8 years ago. And told a crematorium worker to give me the key only after her funeral. That wasn't paranoia. That was preparation. My phone buzzed again. I looked down slowly. Another message. Last warning. Then a photo appeared. It loaded slowly. When it finished, my stomach dropped. It was a picture of my mother. She was sitting in a chair. Hands tied. A strip of gray duct tape across her mouth. Behind her was a concrete wall. Industrial lighting. A warehouse maybe. My chest tightened. Another message appeared. Open the storage unit and she dies. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Whoever had taken that photo knew exactly what I was about to do. Which meant they had been watching me long before I reached the storage facility. I looked up at the rows of storage units across the street. Unit numbers ran in long metal rows. The unit with my key was near the far corner. And suddenly something became very clear. Someone had gone through a lot of trouble to stop me from opening that door. Which meant one thing. Whatever was inside that storage unit was something they were afraid of. For almost a full minute I didn't move. I just stared at the photo of my mother. Her eyes were wide. Terrified. But alive. That mattered. Alive meant time. And time meant whoever had taken her wanted something. People don't send photos like that unless they want you to react. Unless they want control. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Drive home. Now. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened the car door and stepped out. The afternoon air felt colder than before. Across the street, Rivergate Storage sat in complete silence. Long rows of metal units. Security cameras slowly rotating above the gate. Unit 42 sat near the back corner. My grandmother had chosen it carefully. Far from the office. Far from the entrance. I crossed the street. Each step felt heavier than the last. My phone vibrated again in my pocket. I ignored it. The gravel crunched under my shoes as I reached the gate. A keypad controlled entry. A sign above it read. Authorized access only. But the gate was already slightly open. Just a few inches. Like someone had gone through recently. Or like someone had wanted it that way. I slipped through the opening and stepped inside. Rows of storage units stretched in both directions. Quiet. Too quiet. No cars. No voices. No movement. Just the faint hum of distant traffic from the highway. My phone buzzed again. This time I looked. Another message. Daniel. Then another. You should listen when people try to help you. My chest tightened. Help. Right. I kept walking. Unit numbers passed slowly. A security camera turned above me with a quiet mechanical click. Watching. Recording. Good. Let them watch. Then I stopped. Unit 42. The metal door was closed. A heavy padlock hung through the handle. My key felt heavier in my hand now. I turned it slowly between my fingers. The messages had been clear. Open the storage unit and she dies. My grandmother's voice suddenly echoed in my memory. Daniel, always look at what people are trying to stop you from doing. That had been one of her favorite lessons. I stepped closer to the door. The metal surface was cold. Old scratches ran across it. Like it had been opened many times. But something else caught my attention. The lock. It was new. Too new. Shiny. Barely scratched. Which meant someone had replaced the original lock recently. My pulse slowed. That meant two possibilities. Either someone had broken into the unit already. Or someone wanted me to think they had. I crouched down. Looked closer. The lock brand didn't match the others on the row. Every other unit used the same storage company locks. Except this one. Someone had changed it. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Last chance. Then a final text appeared. Turn around and walk away. I stood there quietly for a moment. Looking at the lock. Looking at the number 42 painted on the metal door. Then I slipped the key into the lock. It didn't fit. Not even close. Which meant the lock had definitely been replaced. But that didn't bother me. Because whoever changed it had made one mistake. A small one. But a very important one. They had locked the door. Which meant they assumed whatever was inside was already gone. I stepped back. Looked around the silent rows of units. Then I reached down and grabbed the bottom edge of the metal door. And pulled. The door lifted 3 inches. Just enough for cold air to rush out. Whoever replaced the lock had forgotten something simple. Storage doors can still open from the bottom. If you know how. I pulled harder. The metal rattled loudly. The gap widened. 5 inches. Then 6. Enough to slide underneath. I dropped to the ground and crawled inside. And the moment I stood up in the darkness of Unit 42, I understood why someone was so desperate to stop me. Because the entire storage unit was covered with photographs. Hundreds of them. Pinned to the walls. Connected with red string. And every single one of them was about my family. My mother. My father. Me. And in the center of the wall, there was a photo of my grandmother. Taken yesterday. For a moment I didn't move. The storage unit smelled like dust and old paper. Weak fluorescent light flickered from a single bulb hanging above my head. And the walls. The walls were covered. Photographs. Documents. Maps. Red string connecting everything like some kind of conspiracy board. My chest tightened. Every photo was about us. My mother leaving the grocery store. My house. My office building. My car parked outside the courthouse. Even older photos. Years old. Some of them from places I barely remembered. Which meant one thing. Someone had been watching my family for a very long time. I stepped closer to the wall. My grandmother's photo sat in the center. But it wasn't a funeral photo. It wasn't old. It had been taken recently. Yesterday. She was walking down a street I didn't recognize. Alive. Very alive. My pulse pounded in my ears. Behind the photo was a small envelope taped to the wall. My name was written across the front. Daniel. The handwriting was unmistakable. My grandmother's. My hands trembled slightly as I tore the envelope open. Inside was a folded piece of paper. And a flash drive. I unfolded the letter first. Her handwriting filled the page. Neat. Precise. Exactly the way I remembered. Daniel. If you are reading this, then the cremation has already happened. Which means the plan worked. My chest tightened. I know this must be confusing. And frightening. I'm sorry for that. But there was no other way. Someone close to our family has been stealing from us for years. Not small amounts. Millions. I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. Millions? I discovered it 8 years ago. The same year I rented this storage unit. My eyes moved across the page slowly. The person responsible believed I never noticed. I let them believe that. Because I needed time. The fluorescent light buzzed above me. Outside the unit, a car drove past somewhere in the distance. Everything you need to understand what is happening is in this room. But Daniel, there is one thing you must know before you continue. I swallowed. The next line was written darker. Like she had pressed the pen harder. The person who betrayed us is already at the funeral. My heart skipped. At the funeral. Which meant. Right now. While I was standing inside this storage unit. My eyes jumped to the last line of the letter. And the moment I read it, my blood went cold. Do not trust anyone who went to my cremation today. Silence filled the room. The low buzz of the light. The rustle of paper in my hands. My grandmother had planned this for 8 years. 8 years of watching. Waiting. Gathering proof. And now. The person she had been hunting. Was someone who had stood beside my family only an hour ago. Someone who had hugged my mother. Someone who had shaken my hand. Someone I knew. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. I pulled it out slowly. Another message from my mother's phone. 3 words. Tick-tock, Daniel. And suddenly I realized something even worse. Whoever had taken my mother wasn't just trying to stop me from opening this storage unit. They were trying to stop me from learning who betrayed us. I read the last line of the letter again. Do not trust anyone who went to my cremation today. The words felt heavier each time. Which meant the person my grandmother had been watching for 8 years. Had stood next to us only an hour ago. At the crematorium. Smiling. Crying. Pretending to mourn. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Clock is running out. I ignored it. Instead, I looked back at the wall. The photographs were arranged in clusters. Some were older. 5, maybe 6 years old. Others were recent. Very recent. And one section of the wall immediately caught my attention. 4 photos connected with red string. My mother. My cousin Brian. My Aunt Laura. And my Uncle Richard. All taken at different times. Different places. But connected. In the center of the string web was one photograph I hadn't noticed at first. A man shaking hands with my grandmother. My stomach dropped. Because I knew exactly who it was. Richard Hayes. My uncle. My father's older brother. The man who had handled most of my grandmother's finances after my grandfather died. The man everyone trusted. I stepped closer. Under the photo was a printed bank document. Account transfers. Large ones. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Over the years the numbers added up. 2 million. 3 million. Almost $5 million. Moved slowly. Carefully. Hidden through shell accounts. My grandmother had highlighted every transfer. Every date. Every signature. And every one of them led back to one name. Richard Hayes. My uncle. The same man who had hugged my mother outside the crematorium parking lot. The same man who had just told me. If you need anything, Danny, I'm here. My chest tightened. I looked back at the letter. One more line sat at the bottom. One I hadn't noticed before. The flash drive contains the full evidence. But Daniel. He will try to stop you before you can use it. My phone buzzed again. Another message. This time with a photo. I opened it. My mother again. Still tied to the chair. But now someone stood beside her. Tall. Broad shoulders. His face wasn't visible. Only the side of his body. But something about the posture felt familiar. Another message appeared. You found the storage unit faster than I expected. My stomach turned cold. Then the next message appeared. Your grandmother was very clever. Another message. But she made one mistake. My hands tightened around the phone. Another photo appeared. This one was clearer. The man beside my mother stepped slightly into the light. And the moment I saw his face, everything inside me went silent. Richard. My uncle. The man my grandmother had been tracking for 8 years. The man who had just stolen $5 million from our family. The man who had just kidnapped my mother. Another message appeared immediately after. Bring the flash drive to Pier 17. Then another. Come alone. And the final message. Or your mother dies before sunset. I stared at the photo for a long time. My Uncle Richard stood behind my mother, one hand resting casually on the back of the chair she was tied to. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look rushed. He looked patient. Like a man who had been waiting for this moment for years. My phone buzzed again. Pier 17. 1 hour. I exhaled slowly. Then I looked back at the storage unit walls. My grandmother hadn't spent 8 years building this room just to reveal the truth. She had been building something else. A trap. I stepped toward the desk in the corner. The computer monitors flickered to life the moment I pressed the power button. Security feeds appeared on the screens. Different locations. Different dates. But one feed was live. The pier. Pier 17. A warehouse at the end of the dock. 2 cars parked outside. And a black SUV I recognized immediately. The same one that had followed me earlier. My uncle had been watching me the entire time. My grandmother had known he would. I picked up the flash drive. Then I opened the last drawer of the desk. Inside was another envelope. Smaller. My name again. I tore it open. Another short note. Daniel. If Richard has taken your mother, then everything is happening exactly the way I predicted. My heartbeat slowed. He will demand the flash drive. He believes it contains the only evidence. I glanced at the drive in my hand. But the real evidence has already been sent to the FBI. My breath caught. Agent Patricia Holloway will contact you once Richard exposes himself. I looked back at the screen showing the pier. Richard was pacing slowly beside the warehouse door. Calm. Confident. He believed he controlled everything. The note continued. Your only job is to make him confess. I leaned back in the chair. 8 years. My grandmother had prepared this entire situation 8 years ago. The fake cremation. The storage unit. The evidence. Even the moment Richard would finally show his hand. My phone buzzed again. 30 minutes, Daniel. I stood up. Took the flash drive. Then I walked back to the wall of photographs. Right beside Richard's picture was something I hadn't noticed before. A voice recorder. Small. Black. Already charged. I slipped it into my pocket. Then I walked outside the storage unit. The sky had darkened. Storm clouds were rolling in from the bay. Perfect. I climbed back into my car. And drove toward Pier 17. 20 minutes later the docks appeared ahead of me. Old warehouses. Rusty cranes. Water slapping against the concrete pilings. Richard stood exactly where the camera feed had shown. Next to the black SUV. My mother was inside the warehouse behind him. I could feel it. I parked the car and stepped out. Richard smiled the moment he saw me. The same calm smile he had used my entire life. Danny, he said softly. You shouldn't have opened that storage unit. I walked closer. Slowly. Where's my mother? He gestured toward the warehouse behind him. Safe. For now. His eyes dropped to my hand. To be honest, he added casually, I'm impressed you found the drive. I pulled it out of my pocket. Held it up. This? Richard nodded. Yes. That. You always were the smart one in the family. I studied his face. The man who had eaten dinner at our house for 20 years. The man who had played with me when I was a kid. You stole from her, I said quietly. His smile didn't fade. I earned it. You stole $5 million. He shrugged. Your grandmother had more than she knew what to do with. The recorder in my pocket was running. Every word. Every admission. Richard stepped closer. Now give me the drive. I didn't move. After I see my mother. Richard sighed. You always were stubborn. Then he snapped his fingers. Two men stepped out of the warehouse behind him. They dragged my mother into the open. Her hands were tied. But she was alive. My chest loosened slightly. Now, Richard said calmly. Give me the drive. And that was the moment headlights suddenly flooded the entire dock. Red and blue lights exploded across the water. Police cars surrounded the pier from both sides. Richard's smile disappeared instantly. Because at that exact moment a voice shouted through a megaphone behind us. Richard Hayes. FBI. Drop your weapon. For a second, no one moved. The red and blue lights from the police cars flashed across the water, across the warehouse walls, across Richard's face. His calm expression cracked for the first time. What did you do? He whispered. I didn't answer. Because I didn't have to. More headlights appeared behind the first line of police cars. Black SUVs. Unmarked. Federal. Agents poured out, weapons raised. Hands where we can see them. Richard's two men froze beside my mother. One of them slowly lowered his gun. The other tried to step back toward the warehouse. Bad idea. 3 red laser dots immediately appeared on his chest. Richard looked at me again. This time the smile was gone. You set me up. I shrugged slightly. No. My grandmother did. That hit him harder than anything else. For the first time since I had known him, Richard looked small. Agent Patricia Holloway stepped forward from the line of agents. Her badge caught the flashing lights. Richard Hayes, she said calmly, you are under arrest for kidnapping, fraud, and financial crimes totaling over $5 million. Richard laughed once. Short. Bitter. You think this ends here? 2 agents were already cuffing his men. Another team rushed toward my mother, cutting the ropes around her wrists. She stumbled forward. I caught her before she fell. Mom. She clutched my jacket. Daniel. I knew something was wrong after the funeral. I know. Behind us, Richard was still staring at me. You think you won? I stepped closer to him. Quiet. Calm. The way my grandmother always handled people like him. You confessed, I said. His eyes narrowed. What? I pulled the recorder from my pocket. Held it up. His entire conversation at the pier had been captured. Every word. Every admission. Richard's face turned pale. Patricia stepped forward and took the recorder. Thank you, she said. 2 agents pulled Richard's arms behind his back and snapped the cuffs closed. For the first time that night, the man who had controlled our family for years looked completely powerless. He glanced at me one last time. You should have walked away from the storage unit. I shook my head. You should have walked away from my grandmother. They led him toward the waiting SUV. The flashing lights reflected off the dark water as the doors slammed shut. Just like that. 8 years of his quiet theft ended in a pair of handcuffs. The dock slowly returned to silence. Police radios crackled in the distance. Agents moved through the warehouse collecting evidence. But the storm that had been building all evening finally broke. Rain started falling over the harbor. Cold. Heavy. My mother stood beside me under the warehouse awning, rubbing her wrists where the ropes had been. "Daniel," she said quietly, "how did you know?" I looked out toward the water. "I didn't. Grandma did." Across the pier, Richard was being pushed into the back of a black SUV. For years he had smiled at family dinners. Helped with finances. Talked about loyalty. All while quietly stealing from the woman who trusted him most. $5 million. Gone piece by piece. But my grandmother had seen it. And instead of confronting him, she had waited. Watched. Collected proof. And when she knew the moment would come, she staged her own death. A fake cremation. A storage unit full of evidence. A trap that took 8 years to close. Agent Patricia Holloway walked over to us. "Your grandmother was one of the most patient people I've ever worked with," she said. "Worked with?" Patricia nodded. "She contacted the FBI the same year she discovered the theft. 8 years. 8 years of preparing for this night." "Where is she now?" I asked quietly. Patricia smiled faintly. "Safe." That was enough. The rain grew heavier as the police vehicles began leaving the pier. My mother squeezed my arm. "She knew you'd figure it out." I thought about the storage unit. The photographs. The red string. The careful planning. My grandmother had trusted one person to finish what she started. Me. The woman everyone believed had been cremated that afternoon had just destroyed the man who betrayed her. And she never had to say a word. Some people shout when they get justice. Some people fight. My grandmother waited. Years. Quietly building a case that could never be denied. As the last police lights disappeared down the road, I finally understood the lesson she had been teaching me my entire life. Patience is power. And the quietest people are often the most dangerous. Thank you for listening. Calm justice doesn't shout. It keeps records.